very slapstick week. I've been bumping into things a lot this week.
Oh.
Okay, so it's 12:11 right now. Gonna start the lab meeting, and I'm gonna post in the chat for everyone the script that goes along with our first presentation from Carmen.
Awesome.
Right, and if those of you who have access to screen setup, if you could keep the script open for the presentation, that would be great because we'd like some audience participation.
And I'll prompt you, whoever can volunteer to read. There's a couple like excerpts that I need read aloud. They're very short, and I'll let you know when that is.
Okay, perfect.
Cool.
All right, I'm going to share my screen now and start with the first slide. Oh, and then just a quick announcement from Karen, don't chat unless you need to, as we learned with Lucy Greco's presentation from last semester, because it interferes with the screen readers. If you need to use the chat or a chat function, please use our Slack.
Cool, thank you for that. That really helps.
Yeah, of course. All right, let me just, I'll let you know when the screen is shared and the presentation is going. All right, can I get like verbal confirmation from someone or like put a hand up that they can see the presentation?
2 men stand and touching an object on a white plinth.
Yes. Perfect.
Cool, thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. Do we do like a check-in first, or do I just jump in? I'm happy to do either.
We can do maybe a check-in at the very end, just so we have time for everyone's presentation today.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm gonna just jump in then. Thank you, everybody, for having me. It's so good to be here with you. I'm calling in from the stolen and unsurrendered land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, where I was born and live as an uninvited guest. So it's a privilege to be able to talk to you about this work from this land. I'm going to talk about 2 exhibitions that I co-produced last year. First being Provisional Structures that was shown at the Mackenzie Art Gallery on Treaty 4 territory, curated by Nicole Nugent. And the second being Project Fireflower, which was shown at Grunt Gallery and curated by Whitney Mashburn. So I'm going to start with Provisional Structures. This was my most involved institutional collaboration to date. It emerged from like an over 4-year relationship with Nicole Nugent, who's the curator of education at the Mackenzie Art Gallery. In 2017, Nicole invited me to the Mackenzie to conduct my non-visual museum tour project, See for Yourself. And so I went to the museum, and I introduced staff to my open access manifesto, which is a statement that I wrote in 2015 that describes my position on the topic of accessibility. I used this to set a new context for conversation and commitments around accessibility. So this is my first audience participation point. I'd love to share the open access statement with you now. And if there's someone that could volunteer to read it aloud, I'd be super appreciative. And that should be on my presentation script, and it should start with "to be read aloud." It starts with "open access relies on."
I could maybe start it off. I don't know if anyone else wants to join in. But
Thank you.
No problem. So, open access relies on those present, what their needs are, and how they can find support with each other and in their communities. It is a perpetual negotiation of trust between those who practice support as a mutual exchange. Open access is radically different than a policy that temporarily removes a barrier to participation for a group with definitive needs. It acknowledges that everyone carries a body of local knowledge and is an expert in their own right. And if anyone else wants to pick up from there.
Thank you.
Sure. Can continue reading. Open access is the root system of embodied learning. It cultivates trust among those involved and enables each member to self-identify and occupy a point of orientation that centers complex embodiment. Open access disrupts the disabling conditions that limits one's agency and potential to try. It reimagines normalcy as a continuum of embodiments, identities, realities, and learning styles, and operates under the premise that interdependence is central to the radical restructuring of power. And then the last paragraph, unless somebody wants to jump in. Open access is a temporary, collectively held space where participants can find comfort in disclosing their needs and preferences with one another. It is a responsive support network that adapts as needed.
So after that first visit, Nicole invited me back once or twice a year to continue and build on our conversation about accessibility, and also to conduct public programs. In 2018, I'm just going to turn off my screen reader, sorry. There we go. In 2018, I went to the Mackenzie, and artist Jess Sash was installing their Project Freedom Tube as part of the Re-Celebrating the Body exhibition. It was during that visit that me and Jess discovered that we were similarly aligned in our critique of the museum as a colonial enterprise with ableist assumptions at its root. That was in 2018, and then in 2019, that's actually where this image is from, my visit in 2019, where I conducted a tactility workshop, and it grew out of the question, is there anything in the collection that we can touch? Nicole brought this question to the museum's conservator and then produced 4 sculptures from the permanent collection that we could touch with bare hands. We used Georgina Klieg's framework that she developed. Georgina, you may know, teaches at Berkeley in the English department. I consider her a mentor. Anyways, we used Georgina's framework that she developed with blind artist Faye Devi. Faye lives in Jara country in Australia. And this framework they developed was in relation to objects that they had access to at the Cadist Institute in San Francisco. And they described this framework as a choreography with the objects, describing the kinds of touch that these objects invited. Described a method for grasping, tracing with fingertips, manipulation, and moving through. And so we applied their framework to the objects that we had access to that day. And though it guided our exploration of these objects. It was around that time, after this workshop, that Nicole we started talking about provisional structures and the Mackenzie's intention to develop a new accessibility mandate, which Nicole invited me into. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process towards that new accessibility mandate. Right now, it happened in over 6 sessions. We started with the Mackenzie's Equity Task Force, which included Nicole, as well as John Hampton, who is the executive director at the Mackenzie. He is one of the few executive directors of a museum on this side of the border who is Indigenous. So the institution is Indigenous led. And all the other participants were from curatorial, from development, strategic initiatives, and they all brought other identity positions to the table, and were considering accessibility from different angles. Through these 6 sessions, we actually also invited a wider circle of participants to these meetings too. These are people who the Mackenzie had worked with over the years, including my friend David Garneau, who is a Métis painter and curator in Treaty 4 territory, an Indigenous curator and artist named Peter Morin, Elder Betty from Treaty 4 territory as well, and Carla Harris, who is a queer disabled artist or poet and advocate. We all met, and in these meetings, I introduced the group to the principles of disability justice and the writings of Mia Mingus on access intimacy. We also spent time reading a piece called Bricks and Threads by Elwood Jimmy and Vanessa Andriotti. It's from this collection called Towards Braiding, and it discusses Indigenous and colonial organizing principles. We took a look at disabled curator and scholar Eliza Chandler's writing on the idea of dwelling with disability, and also Nick Walker's writings on neuroqueering and neurocosmopolitanism. Then we spent time with the mission statements from a few disability justice organizations that I appreciate, including Sins Invalid, the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, the Portland Disability Justice Collective, Fireweed Collective, Project Let's, and the Abolition and Disability Justice Coalition. This process resulted in a collectively written accessibility mandate that articulated the Mackenzie's commitment to accessibility moving forward. And in its final form, it is now kind of being practiced and written into policy. Currently, it actually went live on the opening of my exhibition, Provisional Structures, that opened in June of last year. And now the Mackenzie is working with a disability justice cultural organization called Listen to Dis, that is conducting a comprehensive accessibility audit and posing action items for next steps. So they're stewarding the process now. I'm gonna share some images from the show now, so you can go to my next image, please. And this is my installation titled Provisional Structure 1, was produced in collaboration with Michael Liss of Good Weather Studio in Vancouver. He's an architect and designer that I've been working with. So the first image here depicts Nicole, who is seated in the installation seating area with gallery attendant Dave, who is using a wheelchair. And I'm just going to describe here that both Nicole and Dave are sitting underneath a
I'm sorry, Carmen. I am confused as to which image. This is completely my fault.
Carmen, right now we're looking at a bunch of scaffolding in a room surrounding a globe. Oh, I think we found it. Now people are sitting, two people are sitting underneath the half globe.
That's right. That's right. Cool, cool. Okay, so this is the seating area of the installation, and so this is Nicole and gallery attendant Dave, and they're sitting underneath this acoustical dome that's kind of skeletal and futuristic looking. It's made of cardboard, and it's looming overhead. The seating area consists of seating that's made of sandbags that are referencing disaster relief. Each of the sandbags has the words open access stenciled onto them. And around the circle is 13 freestanding mirrors that are all being held up by a simple wooden frame and a sandbag. And projected from the center of the dome is an audio piece, which is the keynote address that a Oregon-based artist named Vo gave. And this keynote was from a 2020 conference that the Portland Disability Justice Collective put on called As We Are, Disability Justice and Collective Care. And this was organized by Rebel Sydney Black and the Portland Disability Justice Collective. Vo is a multidisciplinary artist who makes socially engaged work about the various intersections and impacts of trauma. Their keynote spoke of disability justice through the lens of trauma-informed care. And I really connected with their talk on a deep level on account of my own experience of medical trauma. So I asked if I could include their talk as part of my installation. You can go to that next image with the scaffolding. So this is part of the installation as well. It's a monumental spiraling ramp made of scaffolding. It goes up to over 12 feet tall. In this image, you can see the dome, I believe, too, and also a taut red cord that's directing visitors to the entrance to the ramp. The ramp is accessible. It affords the viewer a few different views of the exhibition as they ascend, and it creaks and shifts as it bears weight. Before the visitor arrives at the top of the scaffolding, they're afforded a view of artist Jess Sash, an installation that Jess made that's on the wall. It's a piece that consists of, I don't know if it's visible in this image, but it consists of over 800 bronze plaques that are engraved with the phrase, "I need a minute" on them. The piece is called "Take All the Time You Need." And it's reminiscent of a donor wall at a museum. And so Jess has also selected a bench that folks can sit at while they consider the work. The work's asking for maybe more time for consideration, for access, Crip time. And so, yeah, and so that is, this is a structure that I made in collaboration with Michael Liss, all the dome as well, and the seating area, etc. The not depicted here, but still important and significant, is a evil eye amulet that I installed. It references my great grandmother on my mom's side, who lived in Turkey, then Greece. She was a mystic, and her role in her community was to lift curses and hexes via spells and rituals. She was a believer in the evil eye as a protective symbol. And when I was born, I had an evil eye amulet pinned to my pillow to help ward away ill will or deflect any hexes people tried to cast upon me. So I included an evil eye amulet in this exhibition as a protective measure against ableism. That's provisional structure 1, which is actually going to be presented at the Vancouver Art Gallery in November. Okay, now I'm going to talk now about Project Fireflower, which is curated by Whitney Mashburn at the Grunt Gallery in Vancouver. So the next image here shows my friend Colin Van Uchelen, who is silhouetted. There's a hand on his back, and there's a fireworks bright against the night sky. Colin identifies as blind. He is a community psychology consultant and a researcher. He also has recently been identifying as a conceptual artist and pyrotechnical designer. Colin has an over 20-year passion for fireworks. And as his vision declined, he wanted to find ways to stay connected to an annual fireworks festival that we have in Vancouver called the Bay here in Vancouver. And what he did was invite his friends to meet him on the beach, and they would just experiment with different ways of translating the fireworks for him. And they landed on this method that he later termed fingerworks for fireworks, which involves, it's a one-on-one experience where the describer sits behind the participant, subjectively describes the movement, shape, and characteristics of the fireworks live. And then they also impress this vocabulary of like hand articulations on the participant's back that represent the movement and shape of the fireworks as well. And so in the image, the hand that is on Colin's back belongs to Steph Kirkland, who's the founder and director of Vocali Descriptive Arts, which is a organization here in Vancouver that provides live audio description. For the 5 years leading up to 2020, Vocali Descriptive Arts offered this experience where members of the blind and low vision community could come and have the fireworks translated for them. in this way. And in 2019, I had the privilege of experiencing Fingerworks for Fireworks, and I have to say it was it was unlike any other accessible offering that I had encountered. It was first like an accessible offering that I wanted. It was not accessibility as a means of compliance. It was an example of creative access that actually transcended the thing that it was providing access to. And I really felt like it was a standalone aesthetic experience. I also thought it was significant that it was something that Colin had developed in relation to a barrier to access that he had encountered, and then he brought everybody else into that creativity and his own problem solving around his access needs and these experiences that he desired. And he shared that with us as audience and participant. So I really think of this as like an example of accessibility that can set a new cultural standard for accessibility. And so after experiencing Fingerworks, I shared my enthusiasm with Colin, and we started meeting regularly to talk about art, access, and fireworks. And Colin shared his dream of someday choreographing a professional level fireworks display with me. And I committed to helping him realize that dream. And Project Fireflower was a big step in Colin's process. And so I'm going to share about that show and show you some images of what we made. But first, I'm going to share a little bit about my collaboration with Whitney Mashburn, who is the show's curator. So in 2016, Whitney invited me to produce a show with her for her thesis exhibition at the University of Louisville. And the premise of the show was that I asked Whitney to curate a set of objects that she felt would lend or offer like an engaging tactile experience if touched. And then I reached out to all the artists who produced these objects and asked for tactile access for their work, either for myself or for a trusted friend that we could document an interaction with the work, or for inclusion in our show. And most of the people that I reached out to did not get back to me, but some did. And we did actually receive work for inclusion in our show. And this was the beginning of mine and Whitney's collaboration. And that continues today. And we're currently working on a project with Georgina and Fan that is opening at the Wellcome Trust in London, UK in October. So when Whitney and I were trying to determine what our next project would be, we thought to dedicate our efforts towards Colin to help him realize his first exhibition and to support him towards his longer term goal of producing a fireworks display. And we also brought Michael Liss in from Good Weather Studio. And we started meeting regularly and weekly and discussing like how you might approach translating these ephemeral structures of light of a firework into accessible forms, either through description or through sculpture that was meant to be touched. And the idea was to land on a set of objects that would serve Colin in his process moving forward, resources that he could use that would be common references between him, touchable references between him and his visual collaborators. And so our first step towards the objects was to visit botanical gardens in Vancouver. I set up some visits for us with gardeners that showed us around, and we touched flowers and plants that were had various characteristics reminiscent of fireworks. Colin had told me about how when he was doing his PhD, he would meet with his visual assistant Maureen, and they would look around their homes and gardens for references to fireworks, and they did, they found things like the spider plant that Colin felt was a nice, a strong reference for a multi-break shell of shells firework effect. And also Colin's, the dough hook on Colin's KitchenAid mixer, which kind of spun in a similar fashion to the trunk or tail of a palm firework. And so this inspired me to set up some visits for us at Botanical Gardens where we could touch flowers. Colin also said that peony, dahlia, and chrysanthemum all had served as inspiration for fireworks shells that held their names. And so we touched those varieties, what we called the fire flowers. And we also had the gardeners take us to different plants and flowers that they felt represented fireworks. So there were some discoveries through those visits, including allium, which is part of the onion and garlic family. It has this large pom-pom at the top of it that's reminiscent of the big globe burst of a peony fireworks shell. And then there was Jasper papyrus, which is a grass that Colin also felt was a strong reference for a multi-break shell of shells effect. So that was, I wish I could spend more time sharing about the process, because there was a lot of tangents that we went on, like how do we 3D print a firework and all these things that didn't make it into the show. But I'm going to show you the show now. So maybe we could go to our next image, please. Yeah, and so this is an image of what we call the tactile toolkit. And this is a table with objects on it. And to the left, I believe, is what we call is an installation made by Colin called the Pyrotechnical Tableau. And behind that on the wall are these tactile panels. Everything in the show is tactile and touchable. It went up in October of last year. You know, still during the pandemic, everything was washable as well. Yeah, so on the table there, this references Colin's process of finding firework references in his home. So there is stems of real feel versions of artificial flowers, dahlia, peony, chrysanthemum. There's also artificial pampas grass. There is a bowl of horse chestnuts and their spiky shells. There is a scalp massager, one of those wire ones that kind of arc down like a willow firework. There is a corkscrew, a dough hook from a KitchenAid mixer, a slinky that kind of is a, yeah, just has a helix kind of shape that describes the way that certain fireworks move. And then there's this starburst sculpture. It's a mid-century bronze sculpture of a starburst that kind of looks like a sea urchin. These are all kind of tactile references to different aspects of fireworks. Next image, please. This is an image of Colin in front of the tactile panel of the Shell of Shells firework effect, which is green. So each of these panels, they're made of acrylic, they're black, and they are about 2 feet by 2 feet. They are routered, and the grooves in which that are engraved kind of are, they represent the lifespan of the firework effect that they depict. And it's sort of a composite view where the entire lifespan is visible and touchable. Colin worked with this animator named Leanne Zanier to produce these images and to land on a design that was both visually appealing and enjoyable to touch. Colin designed all these through like support from pyrotechnical experts, people who could speak to like, you know, the accuracy of the design to an actual firework. And they're also lit up with LED lights. So on the, you know, underneath the frames of each of these, there's a LED strips that light up the engraving. Each of the panels are paired with an audio device that you can just pull off the wall, and then you can listen to a short description of each of the fireworks depicted that was written and performed by Colin. And I'm going to give you an example of one of those. And this is also a volunteer participant. I need the following excerpt read aloud. And this is Colin's description of a Shell of Shells firework effect. there anybody that has that text? I don't know what it starts with. It's towards the end of the script. Sorry, can everyone see me? Sorry.
Alright, I don't.
I could read in case that nobody else wants to read.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. This complex firework shell has more than, is that the correct phase? Passage? Yeah. This complex firework shell, great, yeah. This complex firework shell has more than one phase in its lifespan, creating a sequence of movements over time, a shell of shells in a multi-break fireworks effect, which can take many forms. This one opens gently with a soft break at its apex, emitting dozens of brilliant comet stars with visible tails of shimmering light trailing behind. The arcing trails of light look like curving blades of glass. These falling stars then burst open again, giving birth to more clusters of comet stars. This structure is like a spider plant with smaller spiders emerging from the descending vines of the parent plant.
Thank you. And so the final image here is of what we call the pyrotechnical tableau. So the panels that we just looked at were produced by Colin with Leanne Zanier, and then this installation was produced by Colin. A tableau is an industry term for an arrangement of firework shells and mortars that are mortar tubes that are arranged in a rack, and it kind of arranged in such a way to create a scene in a fireworks display. And so Colin, what he's done here is installed in the 3 tiers of this mortar rack, different real feel versions of artificial flowers. And we actually received this rack from Celebration Fireworks in Vancouver. And it was a custom-made rack that when it arrived, it had gunpowder residue in it. And the mortar tubes here kind of look like the pipes of a pipe organ. So on the lowest tier, Colin has created like a waterfall effect by using stalks of cascading pampas grass that are all kind of spilling over the edge. On the middle tier, he has an arrangement of comets that are made with larger stalks of pampas grass and a pincushion flower on the end. They're kind of arcing in different ways. And at the top, there are a series of these spider plant that are stand-ins for the multi-break shell of shells effect. And that is Project Fireflower. Thank you, everybody.
Wow, thank you. I know it sucks on Zoom because you can't actually hear applause, but round of applause. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so everyone can gaze.
Thank you.
All right, so we are right on time. There are a bunch of hearts going around, reactions, and then yes. Okay, so thank you for a lovely presentation. I don't know if you have your screen reader back on, Carmen, but there are some people in the chat. And then next we have Moira. I believe I did make you a co-host, so if you do have a presentation, you should be able to share. Oh, cannot hear you, or at least I can't.
Let's try that.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, it's the headphones. Hi, everybody. Carmen, that was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for having me here today, everybody. My name is Moira. I'm an Indigenous disabled artist, and I have longish brown hair that I highlight with some nice red from time to time. I have an oval shaped face, pale. I have kind of almond shaped eyes that are slightly hooded, and I have dark blue eyes that are like a blue black, really, really dark. I am wearing a black t-shirt today that's a crew neck and it's 3/4 sleeves. Let's see, what else about me? I will be putting glasses on from time to time that are light frame. They're like an 8 in an infinity shape, and it goes across my face. They have like little wiry black color to them. And my background is a macro photo of an estuary that is kind of messy and overflowing and gushy, but it has gray-green colors in it, and yellow brown and bright orange red colors, and some dark browns in there, and a lot of textures. And some of the textures are very spider web like, that are mashed down, and like strips of grass, like long grass, so flat edge kind of shapes. And then there's a large mass of like twirling, almost braided, kind of gelatinous, maybe hair-like kind of algae going across the bottom edge and up to the top of the right. That's a bright red orange color. And I'm going to be sharing my screen, I hope. I know you all will have patience for me. This is going to be an experiment for me. So here I'll go. Let's see. So I'm going to do a slideshow, just so you all know. There's going to be a slideshow, and I'm going to go back and forth between Vimeo for some videos. And please don't hesitate to ask me to slow down or interrupt or anything. I'm completely open to that and support that. I'm wondering if you all can see a thing that says arrows of contact.
I
can't see anything right now.
Okay, let me try again. Thanks. Share contacts. How about now?
Still no. Are you pressing there should be a green button at the bottom of your screen that says share screen.
Well, I have an iPad, and I did do that. Let's see. It says share content, and I've hit screen broadcast. So start broadcast.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, okay. So that's what I have to do. All right. So let me bring that up. Is that working?
Yes. Arrows of contact.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So the first slide is, thank you everyone. Thanks for your patience and your kindness. On the first slide, it's a black background, and it says arrows of contact in big, bold, white letters, thick text, all capitalized, and underneath it says Moira in bold letters, and then the advertising of my website and Instagrams where you can reach me at, which are at Moira670 Instagram, and at Crip Tips, and at Lawn Shrooming, and at my website is Moira670.com. So arrows of contact is something that I think about regularly with my work, because I think most of my work is about making connections with people, and plant kin and animal kin and macro and micro kin of all sorts. And I'm also very much a tactile person and tactile learner. And a lot of my work is very embodied, although I'll admit that on the slideshow today, it doesn't really appear to be that way. And I'm playing with the idea too, or thinking about these ideas like with a slideshow, how can these things become more embodied? But that's a thing for me to figure out. So the first image is of me on a plywood stage that has me at the corner wearing all black and my hair's pulled back. My hair is dark still. I'm wearing all black. I have a short sleeve shirt on with black shorts. You can see my arms and legs. I'm kneeling in front of a 4 foot wide tank and 4 foot wide tank, yeah, and about 3 feet tall and about 3 feet long. In front of that tank, it's a glass tank, you can see through it, and there's a giant kombucha SCOBY in there. And the color of the water in there, it's filled with water and very gelatinous material, and it's kind of a tea color, so a light brown color. And in front of the tank is a wire across the stage, a black wire, and there's a camera there. And it's a live feed projecting the SCOBY up behind me on a big screen. And then next to it is a glass bowl, a flashlight, and some tubing. So the work here that I'm doing is I'm working with macro life and microbial life and thinking about how we interact with them and how they're used oftentimes for health, particularly kombucha or yogurt and things like that. But not necessarily about the care for the kombucha. So this is a performative piece where I immerse my entire body into the tank and cover myself with the kombucha and tear it apart. And it does regenerate itself, and it's thinking about these kind of torn apart things that I experience for myself with my own disability. I have a traumatic brain injury, and I also have sickle cell. And so how my body itself, particularly the liquid parts, get torn apart, and it's invisible often. And how do they come back together? So that's one of my other interests in the kombucha. And then here, the next slide on a black background is farther along in the performance, where I'm bent more further forward into the tank. It's a glass tank again. The tubes are in there. Some of the liquid's coming out on its own of the tubes. You really can't see it, but you can see a little bit of it in the clear tube. And I'm holding the entire kombucha body, bringing it up. And you can see that in the lower part of the tank that the water's swishing around. So I continue to fold and tear this kombucha apart as a performance. And then what I do is I go in afterwards on the third slide. I go in afterwards, then I collect all the debris that may have fallen in there. And I place it onto agar gels, which are, you can see pictured here in the third slide, are clear. These are, in this case, clear plastic cases or Petri dishes. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, about 20 of them in this image. And they vary in size from kind of small, I'm going to say small size, to a medium size. And they range in color too, from deep red, brown, to tan, to clear, to almost a pinkish kind of brown color, and kind of green tinted ones, and some look smoky, and some look like tea, like dark brown tea. And they all have texture in them and items that have fallen into the kombucha during these performances. And this is a living archive that I call Living Archive of Contact Zones. And then the fourth slide is an image of me doing something else that I'm very interested in, is reverse engineering pain medication and things that are kind of known medicinally from ancient knowledges, particularly indigenous knowledges, but also have a well-known and highly respected life of pain relief, for, in this case, for pain relief and for oftentimes mental health around the world. And so this is a project about Mycobacteria avechi, which is a bacteria that people may know about, that is in that is called happy soil, and it's in really good, healthy soil. Sometimes it's referred to as black gold. It's also referred to back in the Bible as the healing lamb's fleece, the golden fleece, because it was the avechi bacteria comes from 7 stomach animals known as rumen animals. And what happens is their food goes through their 7 chambers, and then they poop it out, and it goes through very slowly, even though it may not always seem that way, but it goes through very slowly, and they poop it out into the grasslands, and it becomes integral for that ecosystem, for their own digestive system, but also for the grasslands and the forests too, because of the way that the bacteria works with the other microbes in the soil. And then what happens is that we move it around, step on it, just like the animals do, and it breaks up and it goes into the air, and it makes us feel happy, but it also relieves pain when we inhale it. Or to know about this is on this image, this slide that's right here, there are 2 hands that are covered with purple gloves, like rubber gloves, surgical gloves, essentially. The right hand has a blue, like poker, a blue stick, long blue stick, that's going into the Petri dish. And the Petri dish is about as large as the hands. It's clear. It has a yellowish tint to it. And you can see this, in this instance, I was using cow poop. So there's little bits of cow poop in there and all sorts of other kind of bacteria growing in there. And I'm trying to gather the different kind of bacteria, and then I replate it on the smaller plates or Petri dishes that are on the silver stainless steel metal background that you can see behind the hands, to isolate the particular life that I'm looking to isolate, which is the Mycobacteria avechi. But you can see that there's like, it's not only a reflection from the agar, but the areas that are really golden and shiny, that is a avechi, Mycobacteria avechi. And that's one of the reasons why people would talk about the golden fleece, because the fleece is from the lamb, the sheep, and they'd have poop in their wool, and it would grow the Mycobacteria in there. So that's one of the projects, and here it is as a close-up, where it's on the next slide in a clear Petri dish with the agar is a little more clear looking. It's on a black background, and in a square kind of shape, you can see these golden kind of colors. It still does have some pinks in there, which is another bacteria that I would have to plate again. And then what I do with this material is I keep it as a living archive, and I add it to soil and give it to people as like a care package for themselves, for their soil. And I also make a large cannonball structures that people can come and just grab them from, that have been shown around the country. For the next slide, I'm gonna go over to, just to let you all know, I'm gonna go over to Vimeo to show you these, a few videos. But this slide is about a project that I'm currently working on, and I welcome anyone to participate in this. It's an archive for describing mushrooms, something that I really, really love. I really love mushrooms for many reasons. But the other thing is that a lot of science stuff is not described. And then on the other hand, a lot of other science stuff, particularly bird sounds, are described for people. But they're not, mushrooms are not a thing that are really described in a way that's really helpful or intentional in ways other than consuming them. So I was thinking that it'd be awesome to invite people to describe mushrooms. Any kind of mushroom that I've photographed, all the photographs are mine. The mushrooms are from the territorial land I live on in Lenape, which is the Sectog land, which are the tribe I'm connected to, I'm part of. And so they're all in these marshy lands. So I'm gonna try to share the video with you. Let's go there. Sorry. So I'm going to play this again and read it out loud. The small cap is on its back, offering its naked laminals out toward me. Come close and dance with me in the small forest made up out of pink lung wings. Between each fold lies a track out of this world and into this world.
Sitting on a soft patch of spiny, lush grass lies a small caterpillar-shaped mound called the cordyceps, or as I've known them, dongchongchou. When I was a child, my mom would make soups with these fungus, and I still remember the wonderfully earthy and nutty aroma that would fill the kitchen. In this photo, it appears fossilized, speckled black and turmeric in color with segmented ridges that run its curled body. In the middle, a thin bundle of straw-like strips form a nest from which two orange sprouts emerge. They resemble a Q-tip dyed Fanta orange, with bulbous ends speckled with bumps that remind me of taste buds.
And then one more.
What do you want me to show? Just watch, man. Ooh, ooh, oh my God! What is that? Oh my God! Oh my God! Is that a tree? Oh my God! I thought my hair was. That looked like my hair I picked out last week. Oh my God! What is this? Oh my God! Who is making these crazy creations. Oh my God. Oh, it looks like, oh my God, it look like cotton is picking up my, oh, is that Deirdre? Oh my God.
So that those are 3 different ways of describing that part of the project is encouraging people to use their native language at some point if they're comfortable doing that, and hearing different voices and different ages describe things instead of the standardized kind of way of describing images, and also trying to refrain from jargon and maybe play more with emotion in the descriptions. So then the next slide talks about some of the stuff that I do as a remote access party collective member. And we're a group of people who do remote access online parties where we invite guests to do mini shows, and we activate the space by inviting people to let us know how they're feeling, and to be trying to make the space more embodied and talk about where it is that they're coming from mentally, physically, what the outdoors is like, things like that. And one of the things that we do is a participation guide that I'll put an example of one of those into the link, into the chat for you all to check out. And also I came up with these participation cards, which are something that people use, particularly neurodivergent people, during conferences, from what I've understood at academic conferences and elsewhere. But so I made these in the 3 different colors that are used, which are red for, and came up with my own phrases. Red, which is the one you see right now. I'm not feeling it right now, in white lettering across the back. And my friend Maya is photographed in front of that from one of our gatherings. And she has dark hair, it's long, it's pulled back. You can see one golden earring, and she's kind of like gesturing with her hand as she speaks. You can see she's activating it. She has some brown eyes, and her mouth is slightly open, and she's wearing a black top that has a crew neck. There's a yellow participation participation card that says, only if I know you, meaning only if I know you will I want to like hang out, talk with you, chat, accept chats and whatnot. And then green is like, yeah, I'm ready to chat and hang, which means, of course, let's hang out, let's chat away on the chat and whatnot. And so these are really successful for online kind of activity and kind of making people feel safe and setting like boundaries as to how much they want to participate. And again, I'll share these in the link with everybody. And then this work, which is part of the access stuff I love to do, is I think that access should be sexy too, tactile and sexy and fun. And so I created I made a bunch of pillows out of fun fake fur that's like gray and white and kind of Arctic sexy looking, and gray sequenced pillows, and a bunch of bright orange that I refer to as access orange, like plastic. So it's kind of like that space age sexy kind of thing. And I have silver stainless steel trays that are lined in a sparkly orange paper that holds stim jars that are shiny and just like kind of found objects that are in mineral water that they float, and then different rocks that I think feel great, and they're in a tray. And then there's other kind of stim things. You can see that in the image there are two people holding hands, and they have a thing that looks like a slinky, but it's your arm or your leg, and it's tingly and it's fun and it's very sensory oriented and it sparkles. It like hits all the kind of things I love as a STEM thing. And that's where I often work from, is like, I love this stuff. I want to share it with people and I'll learn what they love too. And if I'm sharing this love, they'll probably share what they love. So, and offering the pillows and other activities too, like a blank canvas that is just has acid-free, dye-free, even though it's all organic chalk, handmade chalk that people can scribble on the canvas, and there's yarns there, and there's some orange boas in the background, and people can just activate the space in any way they want, moving around the pillows, moving around the different STEM toys. One of the people in the background with blondish streaks in their hair is curled up and bending over and tracing orange yarn. So, and people are all using the pillows, which is really awesome. And then on the next slide, there's the similar group of people are there lying out on the orange plastic and the canvas that's there, but using the pillows in different ways and using the orange yarn in different ways too, by holding it and stretching it, piling pillows up under their chest or bending their knees and leaning into it. So it's also a place where people who may be in pain can kind of move their bodies in different ways too. So it offers that kind of a thing. The next slide shows some of the embodied work that I've been doing online and playing with virtual backgrounds, where I find that people, particularly disabled people, don't often have opportunities to do movement that focuses on disabled ways of being and moving. And I thought by playing with the backgrounds and being able to hide in them in a way and become part of the background would be really cool and kind of like intriguing for people to further disability co-witnessing, but also to like feel a little better about moving with other people too, not so self-conscious of how one's body is or is moving or is not or anything like that. Because what happens is, as you can see, people in these 1, 2, 3, in these 9 squares, Zoom squares, people are completely disappeared and have become the background, which is the same background that I have behind me, which is the marsh, the estuary, with all the spider webby kind of textures and the different colors of gray greens and yellows and red oranges and like blades of marsh grass fallen in there. And people also end up playing with one another across the screen, which is really super fun, in a way to kind of remove the 2D of the screen and think about it that way. Or they move the screen to different directions as they're sitting there, but do all sorts of things. Then all the while centering our disabilities without completely centering our bodies and kind of moving outwardly, which is really important for me to offer and invite that kind of activity for our disabled bodies. And then the next slide is going to be a couple of big posters that I put out on Instagram, but also throughout New York City, doing work during the mayoral election in New York City. We had over 21 mayors running for office, or 21 candidates running for mayoral office. And I was commissioned by Works on Water and Culture Push, along with several other artists, to talk about, like, what is it about the waterfront and the comprehensive waterfront plan, which is a revisioning plan that happens every 20 years, that you want the mayors to pay attention to, the future mayor to pay attention to. And so of course I went for, yeah, I want access to the water. I think disabled people should be able to access water. It's a fundamental right, I believe, and it should be enjoyable. And I think that we should be able to have pleasure in the environment like other people do, because really, why do people go to the beach? Just for pleasure, right? To feel the sun or the sand, or just to be out in the open. They're all points of pleasure. But so the posters are exactly what I said. I organized a town hall where we could talk back to the comprehensive water plan, and then and the candidates, and it was a public thing, and that was held on Zoom, so it was accessible. We had an ASL interpreter and access doulas and captioner there, and then I took what I said to the mayoral candidates, and also the agency that wrote the comprehensive water plan, and made them into the posters. And the posters are this purpley blue with kind of a grid that's all wobbly with different like smeared purples and blues, and the grid is kind of grayish, becomes purple and a light blue. And the text is throughout the posters are all thick, bold Arial text. And it's a light blue, so it doesn't contrast too deeply much with the background. And I'll just quickly read these. I think there's 4 or 5 of them, and they all look the same and have the same text. So it starts off saying, hi, my name is Moira Williams. I am one of 950,000 plus disabled people living in New York City. I want you and all New York agencies to know that access does not mean accessible. Access points along New York City's waterfronts are not accessible. Waterfront access points mislead people, particularly disabled people, to believe that the sites labeled as access points are accessible to New York City's waterways and beaches. This is untrue. I understand that New York City's disabled communities were not part of the comprehensive waterfront planning conversation. I deeply feel that the plan misses equity, a key word in the plan, due to the absence of our knowledge, creativity, concerns, and dreams. There is no equity when conversation specifically about equity and public access excludes New York City's cross-disability community. Whether our absence is a multiple New York City agency miscommunication or oversight, all New York City agencies must do better. New York City agencies doing better is including cross-disability community in planning, making accessible, including accessible beyond viewing the water, support structures that allow disabled people entry into the water, making ferries accessible, safe and affordable for disabled people, putting emergency plans in place specifically designed with disabled people and accessible, clean, healthy NYC waterways. The iconic blue and white wheelchair accessibility signs along NYC's waterfront must be replaced with the wheelchair icon position before the woman and child in a stroller icon. Current waterfront wheelchair accessibility signs place the person in a wheelchair second. The iconic wheelchair must be first. Disabled people are as productive as anyone else, contributing to every part of society and culture. Parents are not disabled by their children. Such a sign visually notes value that disabled people are less than. We are not less than anyone. Disabled people are the largest community across race, gender, age, and class, period. I demand that you do better for New York City's cross-disability people across all New York City agencies. And then the following images are images that I put out on Instagram, and I made these sashes for all the mayors to wear. None of them responded to me when I went and hand delivered them to them. They all got these really beautiful beaded sashes, like, you know, like a Miss America sash, I guess is the best way to describe it, that were in these bright yellows with like a blue color, a dark blue trim on the outside, and then like a piping trim in between the yellow and the bright blue. And in the yellow, each of them said, wouldn't it be nice to meet at the water? And so I just put them on, all the mayors, the mayoral candidates for the Instagram campaign, and took out language from the waterfront plan that was not really talking about accessibility to disabled people, but talking about access opportunities for boats and for street and other things that really had nothing to do with being disabled, and really was confusing and created like this floppiness in their language. So this first image has 3 women. 2 of them are brown people, and 1 is a white woman, presenting as females. And the first one has brown, dark, curly hair, a black turtleneck that's short sleeved and ribbed. They have like a long necklace with a medallion on it. They have the sash. Wouldn't it be nice to meet at the water, running across from their shoulder to their hip. And they have like a pleated long skirt on. The next woman is a brown woman with cornrowed hair that's kind of gray and brown. It's pulled back. They are holding a mic and wearing a suit that's kind of gray. Everyone's been grayed down a little bit here in this image. And again, wearing one of the sashes across from their shoulder to their hip. And then in the background is another person presenting as a female, wearing a full jacket, dark kind of blackish color, and skirt, also wearing the sash from their shoulder to the hip. They have blondish long hair past their shoulders, and it looks like they're wearing a scarf, and their hands are crossed in front of their hips. Behind them is a photo of the East River that's kind of green. It's the top surface of the water is kind of green and textured and little flowy, choppy, and kind of granular looking. And above them, on a white strip, oblong block, and kind of typewritten black letters, it says identifying access opportunities. And then below, like the image would always be paired with an image of a site that's being called, like, that refers to access within the plan. And I would go there and photograph it and add what the topic they were discussing here. And this image is a beach, a beautiful oceanfront beach. It has some low waves going on. There's some seagulls out there at the edge of the beach, but on the beach, like closer to us, there's a bunch of white sand, like soft, smooth, non-hilly, flat kind of sand. But and then on that sand, there's a cement walkway. And this walkway is accessible because it's not stairs, it's just a really wide, broad path. And it's being disputed, and in the map and the planning, they want to remove this because it disrupts public access to the beach, when clearly it gives disabled people, access to the beach. And that's written in there too, on, again, a white strip, a long strip that's with text that looks like it's typewritten, says disrupted by public access. And am I going way over time?
You have around 5 minutes left, and then that will give us a good 15 minutes for folks to just ask questions.
Okay, great. Then I'll share then part of this work too. Thank you for letting me know. I don't want to take up all the time. Part of this work too was a celebratory party on a barge that was hybrid, and it was an accessible barge, and it took I had to go look at 60 different boats in order to find one boat that was accessible. And it was a barge, which has been making me think as soon as I realized it was a barge, it was a working ship, right? So it's a thing, a beautiful wooden old ship from the 1700s that would freight cattle actually around Manhattan to Brooklyn. And it's wooden, so it's solid, it's bulky, it's huge. It's probably 120 feet wide by 30 feet. 130 feet long by 30 feet wide. It has multiple doors that are about 10 foot wide and 10 foot high. So it has great airflow, great lighting. It's low to the water, and the entranceways are huge. Had a beautiful, huge bathroom. Everything was great, but it was something that's used for industry to cart materials around. And it just makes me think of how the industrial buildings in New York City and elsewhere that I've been in, some of the art spaces were old industrial spaces, and how they removed the built-in accessibility that was already there. And that accessibility was never in the back of the building. It was always in the front, because they were, bringing in fabrics, bringing in all sorts of materials and whatnot. And just thinking, like, making those connections was really interesting, and also saddened me in many ways. But anyway, I would like to, the party on the boat was great. I'm sorry, I don't have photos to share with that, but I do have one of the pieces that was an artwork that I'm continuing on, which is about talking with disabled people, particularly siblings who are both disabled, about access to the beach. And I'll share this video with you all. I'll do some image description here as well. It's the first image is it's a video, and was a flat overhead image of the ocean.
Y pues no podía jugar tanto contigo porque o mami te estaba aguantando o papi te estaba aguantando. Pero ¿qué recuerdos tú tienes?
I think I'm going to stop. Sorry. I think I'm going to stop and redo it, start again. So, because it's in Spanish, so I'll read the text out loud for everyone. I think that's more accessible. Now it's an overhead image of a beach with clear kind of tropical blue water, and a person was on the beach. The few memories I have of being at the beach playing with you was when you were little. And well, I couldn't play as much with you because mom was carrying you or dad was carrying you. But what memories do you have with me at the beach? I imagine we share the same memories of the little bit, because, well, we're pretty close in age. But you couldn't play either, not just because of mom or dad were carrying me, but also in the water. By not having control of my body because of my disability, I became more vulnerable to turning over or losing balance. And then I can't lift myself up from the water. If I turn upside down, I won't be able to get out of the water by myself. So it was also dangerous to stay alone. I remember playing in the sand the most. It was much a more secure space. The majority of my memories at the beach are of being in the sand. It was a very different surface for me. Because I was used to always being on my chair or being on my bed. And maybe when I was younger, that mom could carry me. She would sit me on a dining table chair, but that sensation of being seated on the sand, that the water would reach your feet and the sand, I mean, I didn't like it at first because the sensation was so different to me, the texture. But when I started to grow up, I lost a lot of control in my body, and well, so I didn't do it as much, but the texture of the sand was strange to me. And it was strong, and it was weird. It was a very different experience when I would go to the beach. And the most I remember specifically was the sand. There's an overhead image right now of the sea with slight waves and multiple people in the water in groups and also at the edge of the water. I've always noticed a fear towards the sea specifically. Yes, I have a lot of fear. And more than fear, it is respect, because I recognize my vulnerability in the water. Because a wave could turn me over. A movement of the tides, a change of the tides. So basically for me, being in the water is very dangerous, but also it is very hard because of the accessibility as well, which is another detail as to why I don't go to the water, to the beach. And right now we can see just the ocean, the whole screen is filled with ocean waves. It's kind of a dark blue and they're rippling, there's shadows. Do you imagine yourself at some point maybe getting into the water, into the ocean with me or mom or dad? I would like to go to the beach. Of course, the beach is a part, at least for us. I don't think if everyone has had this experience, but it's something that is present since childhood because we live on an island. And I think that everyone here since childhood knows what the beach is, or at least has visited a beach. So I would like to. It's something that many people do here. You personally love the beach and you just want to go. And I know that you and mom limit yourselves of going because you can't go with, I can't get in. I would definitely love to enjoy the beach more. But I think it has been a combination of my respect towards her and maybe fear as well, you could say. And also the lack of accessibility of people with disabilities that doesn't allow us to enjoy it. And again, there's the image of like an overhead image with a horizon of the ocean and it's rippling towards us. And then it's black and that's it. That's a conversation with a brother and sister who live in Puerto Rico. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. I see clapping.
Yay, thank you, Moira, for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Oh my gosh, thank you, Moira fan club.
All right, so Now we have around 10 minutes to, like let the presentation sink in and ask any questions if we have them. Oh, I see a raised hand. Kira?
Yeah, I was just curious. You mentioned you had like beading on the sashes. How long did it take to make those? Because beadwork can take some serious time and effort. My goodness.
Thank you. This is Moira speaking. Yeah, it was a teacher. So I do a lot of DIY, like, oh, that looks good. I can try that maybe. No. And it's shiny and it's like, again, very appealing. I do a lot of stimming. It's shiny and tactile and kind of looks like the water in a way, right? So it took to make, I made one for every candidate. So I made a couple extra. So I made 22 of those. So it was like everywhere I went, I had a sash I was beading with me. And I didn't really think about the time. I just knew it was going to be a lot. It was a long time. And some looked better than others. But then again, it was also it was an activism kind of thing. So it didn't have to look, I mean, part of me wanted them all to look gorgeous all the time, but it's okay if it didn't. It was like, like here, being like joyfully snarky here with these sashes. So, but thanks for your question. Hope that's helpful.
Oh, it's amazing. I didn't realize just how many you had made.
Yeah, well, equally so, like how many people ended up running for mayor in New York City. That's incredible. And there were more before that. There were 41 initially.
Wow.
Yeah. But thanks for your question.
Thank you for answering it.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to disappear from here. I'm going to go get the link for the participation cards so you all can download them and look at them. But I'm still here. I can still chat and stuff. So let's see. So I just put in the link to the participation guide that we typically do for the remote access parties. And I'll also put the direct link to the cards, but you can see both. And if you can't access any of that, I'll leave my email for all of you too.
Abby is asking how you got into this work. I think that it seems like the question is directed at both of you. I imagine. Abby, I don't know if you wanted to specify your question. This is Simon speaking.
Hi, this is Abby. Yeah, just whoever wants to answer I would love to hear.
It's Carmen speaking. I can answer just quickly about myself. And I say that I didn't start like making art until and thinking of myself as an artist until I was in grad school in 2010. And before that, I was doing these things that I thought of as experiments to better understand my own position in my community after adopting a white cane and identifying as disabled. Yeah, so I don't know, I never thought I would be an artist. Oh man, I'm turning voiceover off. It was bugging me. But yeah, I think it was just through practice and just starting to do things that were making space for myself to do non-visual learning or addressing my own access through creative ways and continuing to do that, even though I wasn't after grad school, I was still not making any money, but I was spending 8 hours a day on my practice. And eventually it just kept, like, I kept producing things and people started to see them. And I was lucky enough to like be shown by Amanda Caccia. So I don't know if anyone knows her, but she's like a disabled curator who was really enthusiastic about my work. And that's how I met most of my friends in the disability arts movement, is through being in shows with them that Amanda curated me into. And that's me. Check.
And I can answer too. I'm putting Amanda Caccia's name in the chat for everyone. Moira speaking. I grew up in a household of disabled people. They're like everyone in my family has a disability, and I didn't really like. We were always making stuff for each other. We were always doing access intimacy with them for each other, which is kind of adorable now that I think about it. And also often frustrating too. But I didn't go to school until my 40s, and because I have a brain injury and it took me a very long time to recover from that. Not that I don't think that anyone really recovers from a traumatic brain injury, because it's always, your brain's always changing and whatnot. But it took me a very long time to get to school, and I really wanted to be an environmental and a disability justice lawyer, and that didn't happen because of my brain injury. And I was like, well, I like art, so I've been fighting being an artist, but I should just do it. So I did it, and it took me a long time to find my way to the disability community, because it wasn't, although I went to school in New York City, it wasn't something that people really were talking about then, and then they should have been, because I graduated in 2008 in undergrad and 2012 in graduate school. So it just, even when I would talk disability in my undergrad or graduate program, several professors were really awesome and supportive, but and would like send some things my way, but people really weren't that well versed in it. So it took me a long time to get my work shown, because I am speaking about disability. Like whenever I'm doing stuff with the environment, it's always about these different layers of disability, because I see the land as disabled equally as our bodies are, and the same things, the same oppressions. So, and that goes for Indigenous people, all people of oppressed people, right? But so it took me a long time, and but because I live in New York City, I was fortunate enough to like just go out and look for people, and that's how I started doing it. And I do disability stuff because I think because I want to make contact with people, and I want to very much about social justice and cross disability, and also working across justices. But thanks, Moira out.
Thank you, Abby and Kira, for prompting such interesting discussions. And I also wanted to know how both of y'all got into this. So thank you. Just going to wrap things up for our next presenter, Aman, if you are ready. And thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. So let me share my screen. I'm going to be presenting on behalf of the Good Maps team. Just a quick check-in. Can everyone hear me? Is everything good with audio? Okay, thank you. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Perfect. And let me go into presenting mode. All right. So hi, everyone. I'm going to be presenting on behalf of Good Maps. I'm very excited. We started working with them around early February, maybe even late January. And it's been very exciting thus far. And let's get into some brief introductions. So unfortunately, Sifat was not feeling well, so she's not able to be here. So I'll quickly introduce her. She's a she, her pronouns. She is a public health major and a second year, and was actively involved with team ethnography in the lab. And the image description shows that she's a woman with brown skin and long black hair, wearing a yellow top and a pink skirt. She's shown outdoors and smiling with hands on her hips. Yeah. And then I'll have Mary introduce Alexandra and herself.
Yeah, hi, Mary speaking. So to the right of Sifat's image is an image of Alexandra Gomez. She is a data science major. Her pronouns are she, hers. And the image description is a woman with brown skin and long curly hair. She is photographed outdoors wearing a purple top and smiling. And next to Alex's image is me. Hi, I'm Mary Sanchez. I'm a fourth year in architecture, she, her pronouns. And the image description for my image is a woman with light beige skin and black straight hair is shown smiling and looking down. She is wearing a gray jacket and is outdoors.
Thank you. And I guess that goes to me. So my name is Aman. I am a second year. I'm studying public health and minoring in data science. I joined the lab this year in fall, and I'm working on sensible computing as a team and also am the undergraduate lab manager for the lab. And the image description says a man with brown skin and black wavy hair is wearing a light brown sweater, and he is pictured smiling outdoors. All right. So just a brief overview of what Good Maps even is and what we were doing in collaboration with them. So Good Maps is a digital mapping platform and it promotes accessible navigation of indoor spaces. So essentially we got in contact with their CEO, Mike May. This was through Nate, who was an amazing help. And we started working with them because they said they were interested in expanding to college campuses and they had worked with Berkeley in the past. They utilize LiDAR, which is basically a combination of the words light and radar, but now it's commonly used as an acronym for light detection and ranging, which is a technology used to collect data about indoor spaces. And then when they upload that data, you can manually enter in POIs or points of interest within those spaces. And Good Maps itself was born out of the APH, or the American Printing House for the Blind, and they quote that they were created because the mission of universal accessible navigation was limited by a lack of indoor digital mapping. So they noticed a blatant need to create more accessible spaces, and that's why they outsourced to us, because they noticed that this is especially a problem in college campuses. And the image description on the right says the Good Maps logo is shown with the word good in bold yellow font and maps adjacent to the right in black standard font. And a subscript below that reads maps with a mission. All right, so the Zellerbach project, which is what we were working on. So I included two images. The image on the left is UC Berkeley Zellerbach Hall. It's a large brown colored auditorium with stadium style seating and large overhead lights. Staircases line both sides of the facility, and there is also a central stage. And then I also included a tweet that the Good Maps company made about us. And the tweet reads, at UC Berkeley has committed to expanding accessibility to the Zellerbach Hall, a fine arts performance space on campus. With Good Maps, visitors will now be able to enjoy a show or play with greater access to the building. And so, yeah, this was very exciting that they wanted to have us explore the space with them and get to use their technology. And so Zellerbach Day was when we went to visit. Prior to that, their team member, Evelyn Tichenor, had conducted onboarding with us and basically introduced us to their software, which we'll get into. It's called Good Maps Studio. And then on February 7th, Alex and Mary headed over to Zellerbach to work with the CEO, Mike May, and the Good Maps team on plotting points of interest within Zellerbach, which I'll show in the subsequent slide. Basically, they utilized the software and they labeled designated spaces and seating areas and bathrooms and stuff like that. And also they labeled which areas were student exclusive, employee exclusive, etc. So, and that was in like the afternoon. It was a pretty fun day from what I've heard, but yeah. And so now let's get into mapping, which in my opinion is the fun part. So Mary and myself were given Studio access. A Good Map Studio is an intuitive software and it's focused on plotting points of interest and access restrictions. So labeling which spaces are designated for whom. Before we started working with it, we had a brief meeting with their UX and UI designers to really help us understand why it was designed the way it was and how to use it. It was only about 20 minutes and we were able to fully take advantage of the software. So I think it was a really successful, and we also focus on accessibility related deliverables. So we learned how to best communicate what spaces are and who they're designated for within their software. And on the right, you can actually see the Good Map Studio software itself. So that's the interface. It showcases a digital floor plan with different highlighted sections that correspond to an editable key. And on the left-hand side, you can see some text boxes, and this is where we manually like edit the labels. And it was very straightforward to use, and I think we all had a great time getting to become acquainted with it. All right, so now let's talk a bit more about like the data collection process, which is what is called point cloud mapping. It's used in a lot of spatial mapping circles. It's used professionally. And basically it utilizes laser technology to map out points in three-dimensional space as vectors. And each point possesses its own Cartesian coordinates, so in X, Y, and Z. And as we discussed, LiDAR is the method that they use to determine VDs, which are variable distances. How they do that is, it's pretty complex. I don't understand all of it, but they basically use lasers and they track how long it takes for a signal from the laser to bounce back off of like an object. And that's how they determine like basically the distance of points and also how they correspond to one another. And Good Maps itself is highly skilled at transforming complex point cloud imaging into coherent digital layouts like the one we saw on the previous slide. And I also included just a reference for how it's used in other research endeavors. This is a multicolored point cloud map of Finland's Puolanki River. The labels just on the left and the bottom display the latitude and longitude, and the image is populated with actually points in space that were measured using that laser technology. So it's pretty cool. And yeah. And so that's how they collect the data, but how it's actually represented is pretty interesting. So the way that we collected this data was we got one of the Good Maps staff members carried a backpack, a LiDAR backpack, which basically had a bunch of cameras and lasers, and it was pretty cool. And this is how indoor areas are mapped via Good Maps tech. It takes 360-degree images, laser measurements, and video footage. And then this spatial data is stored in multiple representations. First, you have just a bunch of points in 3D space, kind of looks like a blob. But then they transform that effectively into a 2D floor plan using an algorithm. And then from there, they make it a 3D model. And so on the right, you can see something actually taken from the Good Maps website, which is a point cloud map. And you see purple and red points are scattered all around. The purple points are concentrated on the left with red on the right. And the points appear to be spaced out as vectors in 3D space. And each component seems to be forming a building. And the points in the building are effectively identified in reference to their neighbors. I know that sounds kind of complex. Basically, it's just, it looks like a building, but it's a bunch of dots, and that's how they map everything out. It's pretty cool. Okay, so now to talk about what's to come with this project. This project was very amazing to work on, but it was also quite short in scope because we basically went in, went out, just worked on Zellerbach, and then communicated our insights to them. We're eager to work with Good Maps in the future. This definitely depends on their discretion. But the good news is that Evelyn and the CEO, Mike May, have both mentioned interest in outsourcing to college campuses, especially Berkeley, because that's actually where their outsourcing started, as their college campus spaces remain highly inaccessible to blind and visually impaired students and the disabled community at large. And so Good Maps collaboration will require the company admin to make a commute to the campus because they're the ones who want to use their technology. So we will definitely remain in contact via email to determine if additional buildings can and will be mapped, but it's looking pretty good. It just depends on what they want to do. So yeah. So we learned a great deal from this project. First of all, I learned what LiDAR technology actually is, because I had no idea going into this project, and how spatial mapping can and should become standard practice in spatial design. Accessibility is a cornerstone of designing spaces, but unfortunately, their like designs are not made to be very intuitive and understandable for all learners and readers. So that's something that we would be interested in figuring out how that can be prioritized further. Also, we learned how to navigate a collaboration when parties are largely communicating remotely. In my own meetings with Sensible and in other research project spaces, we're all able to meet either on campus or we're able to like actually be able to work on things concretely. But having to coordinate things largely remotely and plan a commute was pretty interesting, but it all worked out really great. We also learned how our own campus can improve accessibility. We've been having a lot of slideshow presentations and learning a lot more about building accessibility, even just in the lab presentations, but it was really cool to be able to actually go and see how that translates to like fixing that issue or like trying to remedy it in an actual campus space. And lastly, I think perhaps most importantly, we learned the nuances of working with a company while also prioritizing Disability Lab Cornerstone. For the majority of Disability Labs projects, we're working on things that we've effectively thought of, like kind of vetted through and figured out these appeal to our mission statement. And we want to use these to promote accessibility and also maybe to engage like a particular community, disability-centered design, things like that. When you're working with a company, you have to their own objectives and their own insights. And so that means we obviously wouldn't want to take on just any project with any company because it has to align with the lab's values. And so I think this was a great example of working with a company that's committed to disability equity and improving accessibility. They really expressed a desire and they had a lot of blind workers working on the team. The CEO himself is a blind man. And it was really amazing to get to see how they like prioritize disability-centered design in all their efforts. And so remaining objectives, this is kind of a recap, but we're going to remain in contact with the Good Maps team and discuss any future collaborations with them. We're going to consider how we can further explore spatial mapping and LiDAR tech in the lab. For example, there might be applications to Team Ramp if it gets jump-started, or just new projects that we might think of that could be potentially using LiDAR and if that's even feasible. We want to publish information on the website when we can, following permission granted to use images or information about the tech from Mike and his team. So we'll see how that goes. And then also learn about which campus buildings are in most dire need of accessibility mapping. Some would make the argument that it's kind of all of them in a way because they were not really designed to accommodate disabled experiences, which is unfortunate. But I think that there are definitely some buildings that have a lot of work to be done. And I think it would be cool to identify those, which many have already been identified, and just explore how we can help work and fix that issue. And then just almost done. So this is the just a slide where I wanted to really summarize what the project is. So it's basically integrating accessibility, intuitive design, and technological scope. We learned how to incorporate all those parameters into a functional sort of consulting project, which was very cool. And yeah, that was the project. We were very grateful to be working on it and we had a great experience. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, Aman, and right on time too. Thank you to everyone who stuck it out till the end. And I think that Good Maps is one of the projects that not a lot of Black people knew about, so hopefully this will keep everyone in the loop. Right, so it is 2 p.m. now. Lab is officially over, but I will be keeping the room open for a little bit longer for folks who just want to stay and chat. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a good weekend and a good spring break. We won't be seeing all of y'all next week, but we will be seeing you hopefully the week after. Right, Nate? do you mind turning off the recording?